What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I'm really excited about my guest today, but I'm always excited about my guests. It's so much fun to do the show. But I was sitting in my kitchen the other day, just scrolling through LinkedIn, like I'm known to do, right? And I see that my longtime friend, Dave Brock, has made a post. Now, I always want to read Dave's post because it's always something that I want to jump into. And so we've been together, in the sales world a long time, and we agree on most things. So it's always fun to get in on whatever he's talking about. So this post was on a topic that I often talk about as well. And I laughed when I read his words. It's a basic intelligence test. If I had to choose who I wanted to talk to, a seller or a CEO, I'd choose the CEO 100% of the time. And so I started giggling and was writing back to him. And then I posted on a comment, why don't you just come on the show and talk with me about this? And of course, he agreed. So that's what we're going to do today. And, Dave's had a long history in sales. He's done it all from selling to being the CEO. So he can bring that perspective to us. And he's also the author of a book we'll talk about a little bit later called The Sales Manager's Survival Guide, which many of you need to read. So welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks so much, Alice. I'm really excited to be on this. And this is really kind of a fun topic to talk about. We see so much really good use of executives and just absolutely horrid use of executives.
Oh, gosh. So, you and I are going to share some stories.
Yeah.
I mean, right? We of course, any human who's trying to buy something, especially from an early stage company, wants to talk to the CEO. Of course they do, right? But and many times they get to when it's a founder-led sale, but there becomes a point where the CEO just can't be jumping in all the time. We're going to get to that in a second. Now, before we jump right in, I wanted you to just share a little bit about what you do now today. I know you've played many roles in sales, but tell us about what you do today.
Right now, I run a company called Partners in Excellence. We're a boutique company. There are about 15 of us scattered around the world, and we're mostly refugees of very, very large corporations, and most of us have held fairly senior roles in those corporations. So our client base tends to be large technology, industrial product, professional services companies around the world, and we advise them on kind of strategies, go-to-market strategies, and those kinds of things.
But every once in a while, you do jump in there with a very new company, a fresh company.
It's interesting. We have, from a revenue point of view, probably 90% of our revenue comes from very large companies. From a project point of view, probably about 35% of our projects are with very early stage companies. And it's in early stage companies, you can accomplish so much so quickly and learn a huge amount. And then we take those into the lumbering, very, very large companies and say, how can we help you innovate and change and drive those kinds of things?
Yeah, so much fun. I love working with early stage companies. I don't often get to do it, but I've got one right now I'm pretty excited about. So that's a lot of fun. Now, neither of us really agrees that the senior executives and the CEOs should be having to rescue deals all the time because it's not sustainable. Even in the early years, right? Well, when they're doing founder-led sales, yes, they're going to be handling the deals from start to finish. But once they've moved past that, they just can't be expected to rescue all the deals. But we both also really believe that CEO confidence or that senior leader confidence is needed at times to get a deal closed. I mean, especially when you're a small company selling to a company that's 100 to 1,000 times your size, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about Really, when are the times when that senior executive presence are needed? What does that look like? What are the triggers? How do we know we need a senior executive on a deal? Whether the company's large or small, early stage, or,
Yeah.
30 years in, what are the things that tell us, gosh, it would be helpful to have a senior executive or a CEO in on this deal?
I think a lot of times is where I've been used as a senior executive or where I've used senior executives, some of the times it's to open doors.
Yeah.
If I'm going my as a salesperson, my normal path of prospecting and getting in and trying to catch attention, sometimes that's way too long. And sometimes we can leverage senior executives, whether it's their title, their visibility, or their experience, to help open doors at more senior levels faster.
Yeah.
And so I've leveraged that quite a bit of times. And then sometimes there's situations like I have one very, very large client in Europe right now where they have had some major quality problems in delivering their products. And the CEO has had to go in and apologize and
Mm,
sit down and work
yeah.
with the customer to rebuild their confidence. And it's the right thing to do. In a few of these companies, they've been really difficult situations. And the person that has the most credibility, not the only person that has credibility, but in those situations, sometimes the top executives have more credibility and have more impact than the salesperson or customer service person or whatever.
Yeah. Let's go back to the first one because I think it's really important to think about opening doors. And I know
Mhm.
in early stage companies, the CEOs open a lot of doors. They use their network during founder led sales,
Right.
right? But what's always so interesting to me, Dave, is that as soon as they hire salespeople, they somehow stop door opening, right? They somehow stop leveraging their network and they
Mhm.
think, oh, the salespeople should do all that work. They should go and open
Yep.
all those doors. But I think throughout a company's maturity, the CEO and senior executives could do so much more to open doors. So let's talk about that. Why do you think they stopped doing it? And, how do we get them to understand how important it is to continue doing it?
I think they stop both for good reasons and bad reasons. I think what we want to do is we want to build the skills within our organization for the people who are responsible for opening doors to be able to do that. And also, if we aren't building the skills in the sales organization, if we aren't building the skills in sales management and so on to open doors, then we'll be limited in our ability to grow. If we're always dependent on the top executives to open doors, there's only so many doors I can open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And also, one is we have to build the capability, but there are situations where where I see the fastest path to engaging a customer may be the CEO. So there are a lot of areas where I see CEOs really being leveraged very effectively at trade shows and conferences.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and, and I've been in lots of places where I've been maybe the top executive, and the sales team has has asked me to go with them to meet a particular customer. And you spend a few minutes establishing a relationship, getting things going, and kind of kickstarting something that may have taken them a very, very long time to do. So at trade shows and conferences, is I, when I have been a senior executive, I've said, use me whatever way you can, whatever doors I can open, and whatever connections I can do through this. It's very, very powerful. Again, there's certain very big, possibly difficult situations where we want to find a way to get in very, very quickly and at a higher level. And so those ways, as a resource, I always have the salespeople, you drive the strategy for
Right.
how I can help you. And if
Yes.
I can help
You
you,
drive the strategy for how I can
well,
help you. I love it, Dave.
Yeah, I wrote in this article, there was an experience a number of years ago. I was CEO of a mid-sized technology company, and the person that ran my China operations said, Dave, I need you to come over and meet this huge client. It was a massive deal and so on. You need to meet with them. And so I said, sure, I'll go over there. And, we were meeting the night before. What all do you want me to talk about? And so on. And he said, I don't care. Uh, they don't speak English. They only speak Mandarin. So what you could say, Mary had a little lamb. Um, and I'm going to tell them what you're saying, what you need to be saying. And he said, I mean, for it sounds trivial, but it was so important is they needed somebody with a CEO card and who had an international airplane ticket to help them feel
Yeah.
important and open the doors. And
Yeah.
I literally sat there saying, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. And he was going through all this thing of we have these tools that are so profound in terms of your productivity. And I don't know how you translate, Mary had a little lamb to those messages, but it was really a powerful message.
Oh my gosh, no kidding. Well, it's so interesting. So that salesperson knew that he needed you. Did he talk to his sales leader before that and say, "Hey, listen, I need the CEO"? I mean, how did he okay, he knew
Well,
he needed you, and then how did he proceed to get you? He told you what he wanted you to do, which was great, right?
yeah, it was he and the sales team decided they needed me. They needed me as a resource because that was the only way. And particularly in those days, the way Chinese companies worked, they were very hierarchical. Um, and we needed to get in at a fairly senior level. So this really was a critical thing, even though it was more me just showing up than what I did. Um, it was very critical as part of their strategy to open the door. And I go back to something that um, I said earlier is I want to make myself as an executive available as a resource to my salespeople to help them where it's helpful. But you have to tell me what kind of help you um, you need and how I can contribute to your strategy. Versus, I see too many executives saying, "I'm going to swoop in and take over this deal," and
Yes.
most of the time those end in disaster.
Yeah, swooping in and taking over a deal embarrasses everyone, including the
Yeah.
CEO usually. And
Yeah.
so we simply can't let that happen. So let's talk through it. I'm a sales rep. I want a senior executive or the CEO to help me on a deal that I'm working on. Now, I think
Mhm.
you and I both agree that today selling is a team sport. So we need a team, we need the seller, we need our
Mhm.
subject matter experts, we might need some customer success people, some maybe some integrators or technical people need to get involved, right? So we know we have to, especially when we're a small company selling to a large company, we have to show that we have strength, we have a team, we have smart people, and we're
Mhm.
all working together, right? And that may include a senior leader. But okay, I'm sitting here as a salesperson and I'm having a tough time on this deal. I've been talking it through with my team, and everybody agrees. Let's get the CEO on the call. I think it's going to help. So, what are some of the things we talked about a few of them, but that would help me decide that I need the CEO or a senior leader and what it is I want that person to do. So one of them we know is when it's a small company selling to a really large company or a company like in China where the culture is just that you
Yeah.
have to have senior people. So what other triggers would tell me as a salesperson, wow,
So
a senior leader will really help here?
so I think I think most of the time it's really it's two things. One is access, and two, the display of commitment.
Yeah.
Um, and also one is its access is we need to get to people that will be very difficult for us to get to, and simply because CEO is printed on my business card, uh, it allows me to open those doors. So there, I think it's really good. And the process I go through is I've always in my team said, I am accessible 7 by 24 for these kinds of calls. But what I expect is I want to understand your deal strategy. I want to understand your plan for this call and how I can contribute to maximize the outcomes you're trying to get. And also, so they are directing me as to my role and how I can contribute. And there were some times, I remember a number of years ago when I was CRO of this large tech company, the salespeople didn't do that. And so what I did in my inimitable, very nice way is I picked up and called the executive and I said, I'm sorry, my people didn't think enough about this meeting to prepare me so I can have a good conversation with you. Do you mind if we defer the meeting? That happened once.
Yeah.
And then everybody said, uh-oh. And we did ultimately have a really good meeting, but I expect you to come in and have a strategy, and I won't accept it blindly necessarily, but we'll come up with how you can leverage me for the most impact.
Yeah.
The other thing is sometimes in very difficult situations where the most credible person, while the salespeople are equally capable of delivering the same message, because of the particular situation, you build the confidence with the customer much more quickly by having a senior executive. There have been so many times where I've been involved where the salespeople I have are actually probably better than me at delivering the message and dealing with the issues, but because of something that's going on, is having somebody at a senior level as a title helped make that happen a little bit easier.
Yeah, I call it bringing in the CEO confidence, right? And
Yeah.
especially in these earlier stage companies or when you're, small and they're huge, right? It's just that CEO confidence. Here's the person who built this company, and here's what they believe, and here's how we want to help you. And this is, our founder believes these things. It
Yeah.
comes better from the founder themselves, the CEO themselves, and it builds that CEO confidence. But I think those are two keys that you said that everybody needs to hang on to. Do you need access that you can't get without the senior executive? And is
Yeah.
there some reason that this confidence building needs to happen? And
Yeah.
there could be a wide variety of reasons that needs to happen, but those are the two things the seller should look at.
And whoever you're getting in to build the confidence is the right person to do it.
Right. Pick the right person.
If it's salesperson laziness saying, oh, I can do this and so on, but it's much easier. I mean, and I have seen so many times where people have tried to leverage me just because they're lazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that. So now if you're the senior executive or the CEO, you mentioned a few things. It's like, hey, you better prepare me for this call, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about it from that angle and that perspective, because you and I both seen it too many times where the salesperson asks the CEO to come in, or a senior leader. They don't prep that person properly. And then that person just swoops in and tries to be, the superhero that saves the day and kind of knocks the sales people out of the way trying to get the deal closed, which is not what we really ever want our senior executive to do. It's the salesperson's job to move the deal forward and eventually bring it to close. So if you're the leader, what would you ask the seller? You mentioned, give me some insight on this company, but let's talk through a few of the things you expect the seller to provide to you so that you feel ready to have that conversation and you know what your role is.
So one, I want to be readily available and accessible to my people to help them be successful. But two, when they come to me, one is I want to know what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish in this meeting. And then the fundamental question is, why me and why now? Is this the right time to be bringing me into this situation? Or am I the right person? And there have been lots of times when we've talked about some of these things is I've said, while I have this title, I'm not the right person to address this issue. It may be the VP of product development or somebody else, the chief strategy officer, that may be more relevant to to what they're trying to achieve. So, as I go through this situation, one of the key questions is, why me, why now? And in those conversations, there's sometimes tough conversations, is, the people who are lazy, they can't answer the why me, why now
Right.
question very, very well. The people who've really thought it out and they've thought about what they're trying to accomplish, who they're trying to accomplish it with, and how I can impact it, there we have huge success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that talking it through, absolutely has to happen. Of course, I expect salespeople to do pre-call planning
Yeah.
no matter what, right? Whether it's just them or whether they're bringing in the whole team. But that means we can't have these 11th hour, oh my gosh, I need the CEO, or oh, I need my senior leader to get on the call, right? We need a couple of days in advance so we can have that in-depth
Yeah.
conversation like you're saying, hey, why me? Why now? Let's talk this through. Tell me a little bit about this account, the company, what you've done so far, right? Of course, you want some background and the why me, why now. And then when you might say to them, hey, I think you really need this subject matter expert, not me.
Yeah.
Let's, see how we can position that. So now you can actually give them some real time deal coaching, right? About
Exactly.
what they need to do to move it forward. Now, hopefully in most cases, unless the CEO is the leader of the sales team also, which in the
Mhm.
size clients I work with, that's often true. But I would hope the sales leader would be involved here too, because that's like a lesson for all of us. Hey, salesperson thought they needed CEO. We talked it through. Really might be better to position this other subject matter expert.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And how does the sales leader now help ask the questions ahead of time when the salesperson says, I need a senior leader, I need a
Mm.
CEO, right? That's a good learning time. So if you, as a CEO, have the sales leader and the salesperson in these conversations, or even the rest of the selling team, it's a nice touch because you are looking at the deal from a completely different perspective.
Well, and it's so important that your mindset is to help the salesperson achieve their goals, either with this deal or with this meeting.
Yeah. And not
And,
just say, yes, I'll do it. It's to achieve the goal.
and so we have to have that conversation of, what are you trying to achieve? Uh, you know, why is this important? Why am I important to you achieving this, and those kinds of things? So you do the kind of typical things that we do of coaching somebody, coaching them how to think about the deal that they're doing, coaching them to how to think about the 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 meeting that they're trying to plan. And there have been any number of meetings where they've said, we think we need you, Dave, but when we discuss it, you start saying, what if you try this? What if you do this? And all that. Could you accomplish those same goals, but do it without me? And it's not that I don't want to go on the call, but the whole focus is, what's the most effective way for you to achieve what you're trying to achieve in this meeting?
Exactly. Exactly. So, what I really believe is that senior leaders and CEOs should get together and talk about this. So it should be somewhat structured at a company. Hey, when salespeople need CEO or senior leader, here's what they need to do first.
Yeah.
So they're ready to come to the meeting to discuss it with the senior leader and they have all their ducks in a row and they're ready, right?
Mhm.
So they can say, all right, great. When we need a senior leader, here's what you do. Check, 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 check.
Yep.
Schedule the meeting, talk it through, make a decision. Maybe senior leader goes to the meeting, maybe
Yep.
they don't. But then you're planning the meeting, who's going to say what's going to happen, all the things that we do to make a great call plan, what outcomes do we
Yep.
want, all of that. But I think we don't talk about it. We just kind of do it. And so it happens very haphazardly at companies. So I think talking about it ahead of time, having a structure so salespeople know, yes, you can use a senior leader. You can even use a CEO. Here's how you do it.
Well, and I think, well, first it starts from kind of the mindset and orientation of the entire executive team, whether it's a very small company and the CEO may be running the sales team as well. But what I've always tried to do in the organizations I've worked in, either as the top executive or as a senior executive, is establish the mindset. All of us here in executive role are here, in addition to strategy and driving growth and investing in the right resources and programs, blah, 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 is we're here to serve and support our people. So
Yes.
when our people need us, we're available to them. Now, depending on the size of the organization, I've had some organizations where I've had several thousand people, is as much as I'd like to pick up the phone for everybody calling, that's sometimes not practical. So
Right.
you set in place a process where the leadership team beneath you and the leadership team knows that Dave or Alice or whoever it is available for these meetings. Here's how we, and I hate to say it in these terms because it sounds way too formal. Here's how we nominate this meeting to have Dave. It's not that formal, but it is one first communicating to the people
Yeah.
that where we can help, we are committed to help.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
again,
That's
depending
a
on the size
culture
of the,
shift, right?
yeah,
Yeah. That's a
yeah,
cultural thing.
yeah. And depending on the size of the organization, in a smaller organization, it could be, grab me while I'm going to get coffee and say, hey, Dave, I'm looking at this, blah, blah, blah. Or in a much larger organization, it may be getting your manager
Yeah.
to say something and that kind of thing. But again, if you don't have that mind shift, and I don't know how many executives I see that it's beneath them to call on customers other than the most prestigious ones. And it's beneath them to support their people in achieving their goals. We think it's our people have to support us in achieving our goals.
Yes. So true, Dave. I mean, salespeople need to know that they are supported by the rest of the team, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
right. I meet CEOs who are just like, that is not my job. I do not do sales. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. And I've said this a million times. The CEO will always have a role in sales, but that role changes as the company matures. Like you said, when you had thousands of people, you weren't as available to jump on a sales call, but for the important ones and the ones that made sense, you made yourself available. But there were other senior leaders who had that
Well,
gravitas and that could give that confidence that were available to the sales team. And this is the
exactly. So
mindset
you
that
have the
we
whole
have.
company, you have all
Yes.
these resources in the whole company. And I mean, anybody that wants me on a sales call for gravitas, they're sorely mistaken. So,
There's probably someone else. No, just kidding.
right, right.
That
There's
would be
somebody else
wise,
that
Dave.
brings the gravitas.
That would be wise, Dave.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes let my salespeople, Dave, say, temper down your sense of humor a little bit in this call. So,
I love it. I love it. But I'll tell you, the thing that I don't want to see is the opposite, where I had this team that had this really large, complex deal. They had been working, we were running some Millerheim and Blue Sheets on it. And they had, just gotten so stuck, right? They were just getting blocked by this very senior person and they couldn't get, the calls. They couldn't, they were really stuck. And because I know their CEO really well, and it was a smaller company, I just said, has anyone asked the CEO if he knows any of the people related to this deal and could be of any help, maybe just jiggling this loose, right? So I go ask the CEO, hey, can you come on in? We're doing this blue sheet session. He's, starts listening to them telling who the people are and what's going on. And he's like, I know that guy. I went to school with him. We're friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, no one even bothered, right? They're struggling and struggling and struggling. No one even bothered to ask the senior executives, let alone the CEO, hey, we've got this deal that's just log jammed. Anybody, can you give us any advice? Do you know anybody? So it can't be that extreme either. They've got to be there knowing that they can ask. And sometimes the senior person does know someone or
Yeah.
something that will be helpful, right?
And sometimes it's as little as a phone call or a quick Zoom call or something like that, just to simply open the door and provide an
Yeah.
introduction.
Yeah.
And sometimes it may be jumping on an airplane, going to a meeting, or doing something else. But again, I think is if we as an organization are going to achieve our goals, we have to help everybody in the organization achieve the goals. And as an executive, I expect everybody on my team to support our organization and what we're trying to do, and vice versa. Is I expect myself and my executive team to support each individual in what they're trying to do to achieve their goals, because it rolls up to what I'm trying to achieve.
Of course, right? I mean, the company cannot move forward and grow if your sales team is stuck all the time. So absolutely, we all have to have that mindset of how do we support the sales team. And you mentioned something else in your article too that I'll just talk about briefly, but when your salespeople feel like they need a senior executive all the time, that's giving us a signal that they need some training, they need some skills, they need some confidence, right? They are needing something from us. So it's like, great. So glad you're asking for us to be on these calls with you or help you. And let's also see how we can level you up so you don't feel like you need us all the time.
See, that's exactly it. Relying on me to open doors doesn't scale.
Right.
And all because I have my day job as CEO or CRO or whatever it is, and that takes a little bit of my time. I just don't sit twiddling my thumbs waiting for a salesperson to call me. And also, it doesn't scale. So if we're starting to see this systemic thing where people aren't able to open the doors and they need the senior executives, then that says there's something wrong about our engagement approach, about whether the skills or whatever. And we need to focus on that because, frankly, the CEO or executive level calls should be kind of the exception for the right situation.
Right.
If it
Not the
becomes
rule.
the rule, it is, you failed. And and that's not a failure of salespeople. That's a failure of the management team
Right.
in terms of equipping their people to do these things.
Yeah. And on the other side of it, if they're great door openers and they're getting in and they're working the deals, but they can't close them without a senior executive, it's
Yeah.
like ding, ding, ding. We
Yeah.
need some training, some support. Like, what is it that's preventing them from being able to close these deals? We need to analyze that and figure out how to support, enable those salespeople training, whatever they need, more product knowledge, right? To be able to do it.
And again, we need the salespeople to be able to do their job full cycle, whatever it is, from opening doors through getting the contracts. And if that isn't working, if we need all this, whether it's me or other people, for additional support, then we have to rethink our strategies and say, do we have the right people? Do we have the right skills? Do we have the right processes and things like that? So as open and willing as I am and want my management team to serve and support our people, it needs to be an exception basis, not a standard way of operating.
Right, right. And so for all of you who are struggling with this, just think about where you might be lacking in product training or, helping them have confidence around their audience, who they're selling to. their sales skills, the sales process. Any of those things might need shoring up if you're getting salespeople consistently asking for help to either open
Yeah.
doors or close them.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
another side to there's kind of the dark side to this whole thing that I wanted to mention. And most of the time I see this with very inexperienced managers or ego-driven executives is those people who aren't requested to help and support the people, but those people who have the kind of Superman complex that want to jump in and do that. And I don't know, and it's I see it particularly among younger managers. And if you see that, they may have gotten into their role because they've been great salespeople,
Yeah.
and they want to go in and say, "I'll win the deal for you." And
Right,
so
right.
and
It's stuck, it's not closing, and they're like, "Oh, I'll just get in there and do it," right?
right, right. And so there, I mean, you have a real problem is that, your salespeople are accountable for managing these things if you aren't building those skills. So you walking in with a Superman complex is the wrong thing for the people and the wrong thing for driving growth in your organization. And then there's some of these I've seen at very, very senior levels, actually with very large companies, where these ego-driven people
Mm.
kind of do things. I have one, it was actually an example with my wife, and she was a regional vice president for a very large technology company, and the CEO is a very famous person, and he's become a good friend, and it was early in his career, and his ego was managing him. She had just closed a 40 million, her team had just closed a $40 million deal. It was the biggest deal in the company. He heard about it, and he said, "I want to come in for that final meeting." And she said, "We don't need you." And he says, "But I just, as a show of, support and all that, I want to come in." And she says, "Well, all this is a formality. It's a closing meeting. They've already agreed to everything." He says, "Let me come in." He came in, sat down, and he said, "If we can do this deal today, I'll give you a 15% discount."
Oh,
What
no.
what he didn't know is she already had the signed contract in her briefcase at full retail. And the customer looked at her and she said, "I know what I have to do." And they closed the deal, a $40 million deal, at the reduced discount. What was most interesting was the car ride back to the airport where she was with the CEO, and she said, "Do you know what you just did?" And she showed that contract. She said, "I have to tear this up. By the way, you're going to credit my team at the full $40 million, and you're going to eat the $3 million." But it was, it sounds crazy, but I've seen variations of those things where, executives pull defeat from the jaws of victory purely driven by ego.
Oh my gosh, yes. We've all seen those over the years. It's just crazy. But I think that salespeople can help temper that if they, look, we can't help the really terribly ego driven. I'm sure he learned a great lesson and he's grown so much since then.
He's a super guy. He's a very good friend, and
Yeah.
all. Yeah,
But I think we can, as sellers, so be careful. When do we ask for those senior executives to come in? Know, what we're going to discuss with them and plan it out and have that pre-call meeting, get them the information they need and make a really good decision about whether the senior executive is actually needed or not. And I think that really helps a lot of it. And I think it's just to leave everybody with this thought, in your company, what is the process for getting a senior leader involved? If you don't have one, fine, just talk it through and write it down and document it and train everybody on it so they know how to do
how
it.
do
And
you make everybody aware that you are available to help them
yes,
if they need help? Yeah,
yeah, that's step one. Our senior leaders are available to help you when you need help. And here is how you get to talk to
yeah,
one of them to see if they can be positioned to help you move the deal forward. So
yeah.
I love that. All right. Well, we could talk about this all day long, but we're running out of time now. And I have 3 questions that I want to ask you before we part ways today. So let's jump into those. The first one is, what is a book that every CEO should read?
So my ego-driven obligation says everybody should read this.
100%.
But the real thing is right now, AI is an issue that's facing every executive in every organization. And probably the best single book I've ever read, it came out in February, is Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. And
Oh,
he really goes deep into AI, the good, the bad, the ugly, how we leverage AI. He talks about this concept, which people don't understand, of working with AI rather than working for it. And it's because it's such an important issue for every executive. This is a must read, and it's a fun read actually.
well, I haven't read that yet, so I'm definitely putting that on my list. And I have read your book, but it's been a while, so I think I'm going to read it again. But especially if you're a CEO who's leading the sales team at this time, you need this book. Hold it up again, Dave, for everybody to see. Yeah, Sales Manager Survival Guide. I love it. All right, cool. All right, next question. Is there a podcast that you listen to that makes you think differently that you want to share with all of us?
Well, again, I'd be impolite if I didn't say your live cast and podcast. And
Thank you.
I'm actually not much of a podcast person, and I tend to look at things really outside of the sales area because that's where I get the new ideas.
Yeah.
There's one, it's Armchair Expert by Dak Shepard. And he does a lot of Hollywood stars and all that, but he brings in very thoughtful people like Adam Grant and other people talking about really interesting issues. He has a way of interviewing and getting really into interesting issues that, I come back and I start studying. And also, so his is one I listen to, and also for the humor around it as well. And then Adam Grant is another one that I listen to quite a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned listening to things outside of the sales world, and even outside of the business world. I tend to do that because I want new ideas to percolate in my head. So I love to listen to some different some science podcasts, history podcasts, just different things that, and then I do start thinking about sales and it somehow connects, but it just kind of frees my mind up. So I really like that as well. All right, last question. What does every CEO need to know to win in this market?
And I think we've talked a lot about it in this thing we need to provide the strategies, the inspiration, the direction, and things like that. But we need to actually be in the business working with our people. And I don't mean micromanaging, but helping them understand, what our strategies are, helping them think about the strategies in different ways and those kinds of things. And I see too many people that are very arm's length from the business and very unengaged. And you find they typically tend to be lower performers. So working in the business, actively engaging their people, creating workplaces where people feel challenged and want to work and want to perform. It's interesting as I look at the clients we work with, ours typically tend to be the higher performing organizations in their sector. There's an interesting thing is that average tenure in those corporations is much higher than average tenure in their competitor organizations. And there's part of it is they create these organizations where people feel valued, they contribute, they're all aligned, and together they're conquering just massive things.
Yeah, it's just so great to hear. There are companies out there doing it well, doing it right. I love that. It's fun to work with them. I feel that way about my clients. They're the ones who really care and want to get it right. They treat their people really well. So they're having a great employee experience, which allows them to provide that great customer experience that every customer wants, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Dave, thank you so much for being on the show today. So fun.
This has been so much fun. I always enjoy getting together with you, Alice, and it's a privilege to be invited to, be with your audience. So thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, thank you, and have a really wonderful weekend.
You too. Take care.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.